Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful, yet often least understood, corporations that governs modern American finance.
Fair Isaac Corporation.
Universally known, of course, by its acronym, FICO.
Right. And for most of us, FICO is just that three-digit number, a seemingly immutable fact that determines whether you get a mortgage, the rate on your next car loan, or even the deposit you need for your utilities.
Exactly. But if you think FICO is simply a score, you are missing the forest for the tree.
A very, very big forest.
So our mission today is a deep dive into the source material. We have a detailed history, a corporate roadmap, and some really interesting legal analysis of FICO. We want to understand how an academic endeavor, a statistical model invented over half a century ago, transformed itself into a global data analytics powerhouse.
And critically, why that near monopolistic market position is now facing some intense legal and regulatory scrutiny right here in the United States.
We have to understand the company that owns the algorithm, not just the number the algorithm produces.
And the high-level facts alone really set the stage for this immense scale. FICO was founded way back in 1956.
As Fair, Isaac and Company.
Right, the brainchild of two men, Bill Fair, who was an engineer, and Earl Isaac, a mathematician.
That marriage of engineering discipline and mathematical rigor is just the perfect origin story for an algorithmic company, isn't it?
It really is.
And the sheer scale of their penetration is the foundational challenge we're discussing. I mean, it is hard to wrap your head around the ubiquity of the system. We saw data showing that in 2013 alone, lenders purchased over 10 billion FICO scores?
10 billion, and that's not revenue. There's 10 billion specific instances where institutions relied on this one proprietary model to make a critical financial decision.
In a single year.
It just shows that FICO isn't merely a vendor, it's foundational infrastructure. It's the rails upon which vast amounts of global consumer finance run.
And if those rails are proprietary and expensive, as plaintiffs are now alleging, then the entire economy feels that pinch. Okay, so let's unpack this history first and see how they went from two guys in California to a mandatory fixture in global finance.
The story really begins in the cradle of what would become Silicon Valley. Bill Fair and Earl Isaac. They met while working at the Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California.
So the initial founding of Fair, Isaac and Company in 1956 was really rooted in this academic environment, applying statistical theory to a deeply subjective problem.
And that's the crucial context. You have to remember, before the mid-1950s, lending decisions were almost entirely subjective.
Right. A loan officer would look at your personal collateral, your reputation in town, maybe even arbitrary factors like your handshake or the clothes you wore.
And make a human judgment call. It was subjective, it was slow, and it was inherently biased.
And Fair and Isaac saw an inefficiency there that they believed mathematics could solve.
Precisely. They were proposing to replace a subjective qualitative system with an objective quantitative one. And the transition from theory to product was pretty rapid for that era.
Just 2 years, right?
Just 2 years. In 1958, they sold their very first credit scoring system.
And here's where we see their early strategic brilliance in market building. It wasn't enough to just invent the score. They had to convince a traditional, skeptical industry to actually adopt it.
And we know they proactively pitched their system to 50 American lenders.
50, right out of the gate.
That effort was absolutely critical to establishing early market penetration. They weren't waiting for the market to discover them. They were selling the whole concept of statistical risk management.
And by getting those initial 50 lenders on board, they were creating an early, powerful network effect.
Of course, the more institutions that used it, the more standardized and valuable the data became for everyone else.
So the company grew, validated by the success of these early models, and that leads to a major corporate step.
They go public.
FICO went public in July of 1987, listing on the New York Stock Exchange. That move provided the capital necessary for the huge expansion we're going to discuss later.
But the score we know today, that universal number, that didn't debut until 1989.
That's when the first general-purpose FICO score hit the market.
Exactly. This wasn't a specialized tool for one bank. It was designed to be used across a wide spectrum of consumer lending decisions, from credit cards to installment loans. It standardized the measurement of consumer credit risk using the credit report data that was available at that time.
Let's just clarify the foundation of that standard. The base FICO score ranges from 300 to 850. And we bring this up not because the number itself is surprising, but because that specific range represents the fundamental proprietary intellectual property that FICO built its empire on.
an objective gauge of a potential borrower's creditworthiness.
But for FICO to become an empire, it needed a massive, decisive victory. It needed a moment where it transitioned from being one option to being the standard.
And that moment arrived with the mortgage market milestone in 1995.
Okay, what stands out here is that 1995 wasn't just another product update. This was a regulatory and industry-wide endorsement. What were the specific actions that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac took?
So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, these two massive government-sponsored enterprises, or GSEs, that are just essential cogs in the U.S. housing machine, they began using FICO scores to help determine which American consumers qualified for mortgages.
They didn't just use them, they effectively mandated them, right? By only buying up mortgages that use the FICO score as a qualifying factor.
That's the key. Let's unpack the seismic effect of that decision. This wasn't simply one large lender adopting the score, because Fannie and Freddie purchased the vast majority of mortgages to stabilize the housing market.
Their decision effectively made the FICO score mandatory for any conventional loan in the United States.
Precisely. Before 1995, FICO was excellent. After 1995, it became entrenched and really non-negotiable infrastructure.
If you wanted to participate in the conventional mortgage market, you had to use the FICO score, period.
This move granted the Fair Isaac Corporation immense self-reinforcing market power, and it provides the foundation for the monopolistic challenges we're discussing today.
So in less than 40 years, a statistical model designed in a research institute went from being a hard sell to 50 lenders to being the definitive mandatory requirement for the most significant debt most Americans will ever undertake.
That's a staggering pace of standardization.
The 1995 milestone changed everything, and it really kicked off a massive strategic evolution for the company.
It did. We need to remember that FICO is legally the Fair Isaac Corporation, a name they adopted in 2003, moving away from the original Fair Isaac and Company.
And this was far more than just a simple corporate rebrand.
Oh, absolutely. It signaled a strategic shift away from being perceived as merely a credit score generator towards what they truly became, a comprehensive data analytics and enterprise software company.
They were no longer just defining risk, they were selling the tools to manage and mitigate that risk across the entire financial spectrum.
And we can trace this corporate identity shift quite clearly by just looking at the journey of their headquarters. It's actually a fascinating map of changing priorities and leadership philosophies.
They didn't just settle down. They actively moved to follow perceived strategic advantages.
That's a great way to put it.
I find this trajectory incredibly insightful. They started in San Rafael, California, close to their academic roots. But then in 2004, after Thomas Gridnowski became CEO, they made a significant strategic pivot and moved the headquarters all the way to Minneapolis, Minnesota.
And that move is really telling. Minneapolis is a major center for financial services, particularly in retail banking and payments processing.
So moving there suggested a strategy focused on being physically close to the operational hubs of their primary customers. They were centering on the business of lending.
Exactly. But the pendulum swung back. When William Lansing joined as CEO, they moved the headquarters back to California to San Jose in 2013.
That move just screams, we are a tech company first. It's a return to the talent pool and the innovative ethos of Silicon Valley.
It suggests a renewed focus on platform development, algorithm optimization, all the tech buzzwords.
And then we get to the current, and I have to say, somewhat surprising headquarters location, Bozeman, Montana.
Right. They established an office there in 2016 and eventually designated it as their corporate headquarters. This signals perhaps a shift toward operational efficiency, lower overhead.
And maybe a decentralized model, leveraging remote talent while still maintaining these big engineering and sales hubs in places like San Jose and Minnesota.
It's a company that is actively optimizing itself, always looking for the next strategic advantage.
That dynamic movement of the HQ illustrates a company that refuses to be static. But the real evidence of their transformation into a data analytics giant lies in their acquisition strategy.
Yes. It shows a deliberate, almost military-like effort to cover every single aspect of the credit life cycle.
Analyzing the long list of acquisitions from 1992 through 2019 is like reading a strategic blueprint.
It really is. Their early moves were about bolstering their core risk management offerings, making their scores more robust. For instance, the acquisitions of risk management technologies and Prevision in 1997.
That signaled an early understanding that simply providing a number wasn't enough. They needed to provide the software and the analysis tools for lenders to integrate that number into their day-to-day operations.
Right. But the major transformative shift, the one that truly changed FICO's identity forever, was the acquisition of H&C Software in 2002.
This was not a small tweak. This was an earthquake. Agency was a leader in real-time transaction monitoring and fraud detection.
And that acquisition was a competitive moat. Before H&C, FICO was focused on assessing creditworthiness. After H&C, they could offer institutions a whole suite of tools that fought fraud in real time.
Why is that so critical?
Because preventing $1 billion in credit card fraud is far more valuable to a bank than predicting who might default on a $10,000 loan. It instantly justified higher enterprise pricing.
And it created a dependency on FICO for institutional security, not just consumer risk.
Exactly. But they didn't stop there. They diversified into the full life cycle of debt management. We see moves into optimization, like acquiring Dash Optimization in 2008.
Which focuses on improving business decision-making speed through prescriptive analytics, and then tackling the back-end, collections.
That's the flip side of lending risk. In 2012, they acquired CR Software, which specializes in collections and receivable software.
So FICO started by predicting who would pay, and now they own the tools to chase down payments from those who didn't.
They effectively became indispensable partners, covering both the front-end risk assessment and the back-end recovery.
And the push into future data architecture is so evident with Karmasphere. In 2014, they acquired Karmasphere, which specialized in big data analytics for Hadoop.
Okay, for the listener who might not be familiar with the jargon, Hadoop is an open-source framework designed to store and process extremely large, complex, and unstructured datasets.
The kind of data that goes far beyond a traditional credit report.
Exactly. This acquisition shows FICO anticipating the future. It signaled their ability to move beyond analyzing structured credit files and into the realm of unstructured, massive data streams,
Positioning them to analyze consumer behavior and enterprise risk using next-generation tools.
This cemented the change to Fair Isaac Corporation. They became a vendor of high-end analytical infrastructure.
And finally, the aggressive move into anti-financial crime and security.
Right. They acquired Tonbeller AG in 2015, specializing in anti-money laundering and compliance, then Quadmetrics in 2016.
Which allowed them to offer an enterprise security score for organizations, essentially a corporate credit score for cybersecurity risk.
And EasyMcom in 2019. So you are precisely right. FICO is no longer just the company providing a number between 300 and 850. They are a multi-billion-dollar enterprise software vendor involved in fraud detection, collections, optimization, compliance, and institutional security scoring.
Their business model is entirely integrated into the global financial infrastructure.
Completely.
Before we move on to scale and the current legal battles, let's quickly revisit the scores themselves, because FICO's complexity is also evident in its product layering.
Right. We talked about the base FICO score, 300 to 850, which is a general purpose measure. But the source material highlights the existence and purpose of industry-specific scores.
And these have a different higher range, 250 to 900.
That's right.
So why does that range expand, and why do these specific scores even exist?
It's all about predictive tuning. An industry-specific score is tuned to be more predictive of risk within that particular vertical. For example, a FICO Auto score.
Is customized to predict the likelihood of defaulting on an auto loan?
Exactly. It might weigh timely payment of previous auto loans or the utilization rate on credit cards differently than a standard mortgage score would.
So the 250 to 900 range doesn't necessarily mean the consumer has better credit. It just means the model is calibrated for a narrower, more specialized risk profile.
That's it. And by offering these tailored scores, FICO can maximize its revenue by selling multiple products to the same lender, asserting its specialized expertise across different lending departments.
It's brilliant product segmentation that further locks in their position as the authoritative provider of risk metrics for virtually any lending scenario.
So now we connect that deep history and strategic evolution to FICO's current market reality. The scale is, well, it's almost unbelievable.
We already established the 10 billion scores purchased by lenders in 2013, which shows that institutional reliance. But the score has also become essential to individual consumers.
Yes, the sheer volume of consumer engagement is astonishing. In that same year, 2013, 30 million American consumers accessed their scores themselves.
30 million.
That shows a huge transition in consumer behavior. It's no longer just a metric used against you. It is a vital tool for personal financial planning and negotiation.
And the market dominance becomes crystalline when you consider the distribution network. For the listener, the three major U.S. credit bureaus are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
And FICO scores are available through all three of them.
That ubiquity is non-negotiable for standardization. If a lender pulls a report from Experian, they expect to see the FICO score as the gold standard of risk measurement.
But the source material also mentions FICO's availability through the Fourth U.S. Credit Reporting Bureau, PRBC.
And that detail is important. PRBC stands for Pay Rent Build Credit. It focuses on including non-traditional credit data, like rent and utility payments.
The fact that FICO scores are available through PRBC shows their ability to integrate into new, evolving data streams designed to serve potentially credit-thin populations. It proves that FICO is not beholden only to the established Big Three.
They maintain universal access across the spectrum of data providers. This is strategic ubiquity, ensuring that almost every significant credit decision in the U.S. relies on their intellectual property.
But their reach extends far beyond the domestic market. I mean, we are talking about a true global data analytics firm.
Indeed. The source material underscores their substantial global footprint, providing scores and analytical services in major international markets,
Including neighboring economies like Mexico and Canada, where they hold significant market share.
The global operational footprint listed in the sources is truly impressive and illustrates the scope of their ambition. International locations in major economies like Australia, Brazil, China, Germany, India, Italy, Japan, the UK.
And they even maintain a presence in smaller, specialized markets like Lithuania, Poland, and South Africa.
This global presence serves multiple strategic purposes. First, it diversifies their risk exposure away from any single regulatory body, which is particularly relevant given their domestic antitrust challenges.
And second, for multinational banks, having a single, familiar, and objective risk management vendor that operates seamlessly across diverse regulatory environments is an enormous advantage.
They're exporting the concept of data-driven statistical creditworthiness worldwide.
That's exactly what they're doing.
And that global scale and proprietary product suite translate directly into immense financial power. Looking at recent financial data, based on 2025 SEC filings, we can establish FICO's current market capitalization and profitability.
The revenue figures are striking. They reported revenue of $1.99 billion.
Nearly $2 billion generated from algorithms, software, and data analytics. It's a testament to the high value the financial industry places on their proprietary risk models.
But what really hammers home the efficiency and the market power is the margin. The operating income was $925 million.
And net income stood at $652 million, a nearly billion-dollar operating profit from $2 billion in revenue. That's the kind of margin you see when you sell proprietary intellectual property with very low marginal costs.
The infrastructure is built, the data feeds are running, and the algorithms are operating. Every subsequent score they sell is almost pure profit.
And they manage this operation with just 3,811 employees. Their status as an S&P 500 component, traded as NYSE, FICO, just solidifies their position as one of the most essential and profitable financial technology giants in the world.
So when you look at that level of financial dominance and market saturation, the 10 billion scores, the near billion-dollar operating income, it becomes obvious why FICO's dominant position would attract intense scrutiny.
Which leads us directly into the modern challenges they face.
The story of FICO in the 21st century is increasingly defined by the legal pushback against its market power.
And the key distinction we have to make here is that the controversy isn't about whether the score is accurate.
No, it's about whether FICO is using its infrastructural status, that national standardization solidified back in 1995 to charge excessive prices and stifle competitors.
And the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, has certainly been involved. We saw the initial rumblings of an antitrust investigation opened in March of 2020.
Which was eventually reported as closed later that year in December 2020.
But the concern, especially among political leaders, it never really went away. We saw a high-profile resurgence of political pressure much more recently in March 2024.
Right, when U.S. Senator Josh Hawley publicly urged the DOJ to open a new investigation into the Fair Isaac Corporation.
The political allegation didn't mince words. The senator specifically stated that FICO appears to be using its monopolistic power over the credit scoring market to increase costs for mortgage lenders.
And that claim is important because it directly targets the heart of FICO's power, the 1995 standardization by Fannie and Freddie.
It's the foundation. Since lenders must use FICO to sell conventional mortgages, they are, in the senator's view, captive customers.
And the allegation is that FICO is exploiting that mandatory infrastructure role to continuously raise the cost of participating in the housing market.
But the core fight, it's not happening in Washington. It's happening in courtrooms across the country through these business-to-business lawsuits.
Yes, We're talking about a flood of class action lawsuits.
Mm.
At least 10 were filed between 2020 and 2023. And the plaintiffs are FICO's direct customers.
This is the ultimate confrontation between FICO and the institutions it serves. The plaintiffs are credit unions, major banks, regional mortgage lenders, real estate brokerages, even auto dealers.
These are the institutions whose business models require them to purchase FICO scores hundreds, thousands, or even millions of times a year.
So what exactly are these lenders alleging in detail? It's not just about high prices, is it? It's about the mechanisms FICO allegedly uses to maintain that monopoly.
That's the crux of the legal argument. The plaintiffs claim FICO maintains monopoly power through a series of anti-competitive agreements and business practices, and one of the central claims revolves around alleged tying agreements.
Okay, let's define a tying agreement in this context.
So a tying arrangement is where a seller who has a monopoly in one market, the tying product, which here's the mandatory FICO score used for mortgages,
Right.
forces customers to also buy a separate product or service, the tied product.
Which might be other FICO analytics software, fraud tools, or consulting services?
Exactly. They make it a condition of obtaining the product you have to buy.
So the allegation is that FICO is leveraging the one product lenders must buy the score to coerce them into buying the other, more lucrative analytical products we discussed earlier.
The anti-fraud software, the collection software? Yes. This creates a powerful competitive moat.
How so?
Well, if a competitor develops a better collection software or a more accurate specialized auto score, lenders may still be hesitant to adopt it.
Because FICO could potentially retaliate by raising the price or restricting access to the mandatory base FICO mortgage score?
It's a network of alleged dependencies.
So the lenders aren't just complaining about the cost of the score itself, but about the structure of the contracts, which they claim mandate purchasing a broader suite of FICO products.
And that they charge artificially inflated prices for these captive products.
Yeah.
That's the financial core of the lawsuit.
The lenders argue that they are essentially paying a monopoly tax a premium because they have no viable alternative, particularly when dealing with GSE-backed mortgages.
And this, the plaintiffs argue, hurts competition and raises the cost of credit throughout the entire financial ecosystem.
But surely the lenders knew the cost of standardization when they signed on in 1995. Is this really an antitrust issue, or is it just buyer's remorse now that FICO has become so successful and its prices have gone up?
Well, that is the central question the court will have to wrestle with. FICO's defense is that they're being competitively smart and innovative, and that their pricing reflects the value of their proprietary intellectual property.
But the plaintiffs successfully argued that FICO is exploiting a regulatory mandate, that 1995 Fannie-Freddie decision, which they claim eliminates any true price competition.
And the biggest validation of the seriousness of these claims came in September 2023. This was the moment the legal challenge received its judicial green light.
Tell us about that.
Yes, U.S. District Judge Edmund Chang delivered a really critical ruling. He stated that the plaintiffs had presented enough evidence that FICO had violated antitrust law to allow the lawsuits to proceed to discovery and trial.
That ruling is seismic. It means these claims are not just political posturing or idle complaints. They are recognized by the judiciary as having sufficient factual basis to challenge FICO's fundamental business model under U.S. antitrust law.
The judge essentially acknowledged that the plaintiffs had plausible arguments that FICO was exploiting its government-mandated status as the national standard. It means the company founded on statistical objectivity must now subject its business structure and proprietary algorithms to the intense scrutiny of a major antitrust trial.
The financial industry is essentially challenging the terms of its own dependency on the Fair Isaac Corporation.
It truly is the ultimate test of whether total market domination, achieved through standardization and strategic acquisition, is defensible under modern competition statutes.
So this deep dive has really shown us how the Fair Isaac Corporation became the invisible engine of global consumer finance. We began with two men at the Stanford Research Institute inventing a concept of objective credit risk measurement way back in 1956.
And that concept was cemented as the national standard for the U.S. mortgage market in 1995. Then, through massive strategic acquisition, FICO transformed itself from a specialized credit score provider into a multifaceted software and data analytics corporation.
Generating nearly $2 billion in revenue by 2025.
Today, FICO is a global data behemoth, providing the metrics for risk management, fraud detection, and optimization across countless industries worldwide.
Yet that very success has created intense scrutiny, culminating in political demands for investigation and, more importantly, these high-stakes class action lawsuits from the very banks and lenders who depend on its core product.
And they're alleging monopolistic pricing and anti-competitive tying agreements.
The discussion boils down to this fundamental tension: the efficiency provided by standardization versus the costs and potential competitive harms associated with proprietary monopoly control over critical infrastructure.
FICO built the engine, and now the users of that engine are fighting over the price of the oil.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We know that your personal FICO score, ranging from 300 to 850, is based on your credit reports and was established as the national standard for mortgages back in 1995. But think back to that long list of acquisitions we meticulously went through.
Fraud detection, security scoring, optimization, compliance, collection software.
Right. Considering that FICO has aggressively moved into every corner of institutional risk management and big data infrastructure, the final provocative thought we want to leave you with is this.
Given FICO's immense profitability and proprietary control over these key software tools, how much more of the modern financial and transactional ecosystem, from preventing corporate fraud to optimizing collections on credit cards, is now silently governed and influenced by the powerful yet invisible algorithms of the Fair Isaac Corporation?
They aren't just scoring credit anymore. They are managing risk, fighting fraud, and defining the rules of engagement across the entire financial world. Something to mull over the next time you see that three-digit number.
Thank you for joining the deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.